Solo mining is the embodiment of the original dream, a defiant act of individual sovereignty where one person, one node, and one miner take a stand against centralized control. We don't just mine for profit, we mine for principle. We mine for ourselves and for each other and for the unyielding spirit at Bitcoin's core. Join us as we dig in and hold the line. This is the Home Mining Podcast. Hello and welcome back to the Home Mining Podcast by Solo Satoshi. I'm your host, Two Sats, and I'm joined today by the amazing inventor of Bitaxe home mining devices. I'm really excited to welcome Skot to the show to deep dive with us on all things Bitaxe and home mining and decentralized mining. Skot, how are you doing today? Welcome to the show.
Man, Two Sats, thanks for having me. I'm doing pretty good. Stoked to be here, get to chat with you about this.
I'm glad you had the time. I know you were busy traveling to NEMS, was it? And kind of geeking out on all things home mining. How was that?
Yes, it was wild. It was wild. NEMS is the Nashville Energy and Mining Summit in Nashville at Bitcoin Park. This is my second year going. It's a fantastic summit. It's pretty small. There's not a ton of people there, but it's a great group of people from all corners of Bitcoin mining, and there's a lot of excitement and a lot of cool discussions to have. Last year when I went, I think it was the first time I had really gone to a conference like that. I had been to the big Bitcoin Magazine conference like years before, but that's just so big that I didn't really make any connections with anyone. And NEMS last year was the first time I really got to talk to people and, get that sort of more personal connection with people in this space. So yeah, it's fantastic.
And that event, I think you were mentioning to me, is sort of like a small group of people. Like how many people were there?
I think it's like 150 people. Bitcoin Park is it's one of these Bitcoin spaces. And so it's not physically a very large place. So not a ton of people fit there. And so I know that the event was sold out a while ago, and a lot of people were returning from the previous year, which is, I guess, how I got invited. Yeah, it was pretty small. We actually they always sort of stack events. So there was, the preceding 2 days, there was events. One of those was the TeleHash, a fundraiser for the 256 Foundation, which is something I've recently gotten involved with.
It's exciting stuff because while you were there live on stream, a block was found. Tell us about that a little bit.
Well, the guys at Rod and Eco at the 256 Foundation, they also started Pod 256, which is a Bitcoin mining focused podcast. It's been going for years. They kind of started this thing where they have miners point hash rate sort of at their wallet or their account as a fundraiser for the show. And they had been talking about for a while now for this 256 Foundation, that'd be cool to do a fundraiser in that same style where miners would point it in. And then it kind of evolved into this TeleHash idea, which is sort of a play on the old PBS telethons back in the day where they would just spend the whole day on TV trying to get people to call in and pledge their support. So the idea is we would do a basically all day long live stream podcast and get people to pledge hash and see how much money we could raise in a day. Then the idea kind of switched from pooled mining, which would raise sort of incremental amount of funds, to solo mining, which is all or nothing mining. So there was a very real possibility going into this that the fundraiser would raise $0 or 0 Bitcoin. A very real possibility, because it takes quite a bit of hash rate to increase your odds to the realm of possibility. But for max excitement, I think that's what was chosen, as the solo mine. And that's what we did. So it was Rod, Eco, Econo Alchemist, myself, Rob, and then a whole host of other guests were sort of ninja launched on stage who happened to be at the physical event at Bitcoin Park. And yeah, we just riffed on all kinds of things, a lot of which was the goals of the 256 Foundation, a lot of the projects that the 256 Foundation is promoting to, promote free and open source Bitcoin mining. And the whole time, point your hash rate to us. And we mostly, Rod had done some work leading up to the event to try and get people, committed to pointing hash rate to this so it'd be a success, and got a lot of support. There was hundreds of miners pointing hash rate and some very big ones pointing hash rate. And it got up to over 1 exahash, which is real deal hash rate, right? That's big time. But it did not get to the point in which solving a block was a sure thing. I think the odds at 1 exahash are 1 in 6, assuming you have that for the whole day, for 24 hours. Now, this was just 8 hours and people were kind of coming and going, so the odds were way worse than that. But at like the 8th hour, hit a block. It was pretty cool because some of the people at Bitcoin Park had set up a node running on a FutureBit Apollo at Bitcoin Park. And so we were actually having people point their hash rate at that machine. So it was like full sovereign top to bottom mining, which was cool. Just kind of showing off that the technology can work. And Eco was on stage. You said you saw it, the live stream, but he's just kind of looking at his laptop. And then all of a sudden he's like, oh my God, you guys, we solved a block. And sure enough, it happened. So all 3.125 Bitcoin plus the fees went to the 256 Foundation's wallet and gave the foundation a huge head start in funding Bitcoin mining projects, specifically open source, decentralized mining technology.
Absolutely massive display of proof of work in real time right there.
It was very cool to see everyone coming together for a good cause. And we also got lucky.
Beautiful. It doesn't get any better than that, man. That's cool. And I love what you said about the tech stack that was on display there in terms of being fully self-sovereign and set up with, the own node and own miner and really solo mining and showing off what is possible, because we do get a lot of kind of outside criticism when people run the odds, like, oh, what's the point of having a Bitaxe? And it's like, well, once everyone has a Bitaxe, or once we have that sort of 1,000 monkey syndrome where like enough come online, then we're really going to start to see more and more blocks be found. And I believe in the last week or two, we've had 2 solo miners hit a block, right? Not just the one live on stream, but another one after that, right?
Yeah, that's right. I think it was the next day. Someone hit a block on CK Pool. CK made a tweet about it. I think that it was like, could be wrong, but I think it was tens of petahash. So like not a trivial amount of hash rate. That's a lot of machines. Petahash is 1,000 terahash. So I don't know, that's hundreds of machines. Yeah, that's great. But they were solo mining. They got the full block reward. CK Pool has a small fee, 2% fee, I think, or maybe it's 1%. But they got the lion's share of the block reward and proved once again that it's doable.
That's amazing. Yeah, what a feeling that must be. So, in the spirit of all of that, I think it's really important to just sort of dig into your origin story and how the Bitaxe, this beautiful piece of self-sovereign technology, came to be. I've got mine hashing away over there just off screen, and I've got one here yet to set up. But I would just love to hear a little bit about your origin story and how this thing came into existence.
Sure. Let's see. I guess starting in high school, I was very interested in electronics, just hacking on stuff. Wasn't particularly good at math, and that kind of made me worried about pursuing it professionally, but I certainly liked it. I did all kinds of electronics projects with my friends and loved playing with computers and stuff. Typical kind of nerd stuff, I guess. One thing that really got me intrigued, though, was with a friend in high school. I started a pirate radio station. This was like early internet. There was very primitive plans for an FM transmitter that you could build yourself. In fact, it was a kit, but it was like a locally made kit. And so I got the kit and like built this, and it worked. Like, it was cool. I mean, it had a range of like just around my house, this one transmitter, but it really like was exciting. This thing actually worked. And so kind of went down the rabbit hole on that, got an amplifier, got a bigger antenna, put it at the top of a very tall tree, expanded the reach of this pirate radio station. And it was really fun. It was cool to be creative, play the music that I wanted to, that my friends wanted to, and just be a part of that. It was also very enlightening for me, realizing what a an impressive agency the FCC is, right? The Federal Communications Commission in the United States regulates FM broadcasts, and they favor by a wide margin, especially in the late 90s when this was, they favor by a wide margin large corporate broadcasters. And so it was impossible, basically impossible for anyone to get alternative ideas and just what they wanted to on the air, the public airwaves, because the FCC just would take any market and divvy it up amongst the highest bidders, which were like this company called Clear Channel that owns all the radio stations across the country. So there's some like revolutionary protest angle to it, which was also really fun. The FCC came and shut me down. They gave me a very sternly worded warning, which was nice. I guess they didn't have to give me a warning. There's potentially large penalties that come with that. They gave me a warning, said never to do it again. My parents were also like, never do that again. And so that was the end of that. But it was cool. It got me interested in electronics. It got me interested in free speech and the tools to promote free speech, I guess.
And so you were in high school when they came and shut you down?
Yeah.
Punk rock, man. That's punk rock.
They like rolled up to my parents' house and like, oh man, it was a thing. I didn't tell my parents exactly the legality of this all. Like obviously they knew it was happening because people would show up to the basement all the time to be on radio shows and things. Yeah. They were like, obviously thought it was cool, but were not encouraging me to risk the severe penalties that went along with continuing to do that. Stopped there. And this was, late 90s, I think early 2000s is basically when podcasting and internet radio and all that stuff basically just destroyed like local FM radio stations. So it was irrelevant fairly soon after that anyways.
Right.
So yeah, always interested in electronics. I went and got a tech job after high school, got to work with basically my idols at a awesome tech company that I was a very big fan of and worked there for a long time. Then I was like, I need to go get a college degree. And so I quit that job and decided to go back to school. And I was like, I'm just going to go get a degree. I don't even know what. At this point, I was still very like hesitant to do a technical subject because of my like poor performance in math class in high school. I think I took an astronomy class though, like for non-majors, like this very like intro, no math astronomy class. And that blew my mind. It absolutely, like I would go in there and this teacher was so stoked and every day would just, or I guess it was every other day, whenever the class was, the teacher would just blow my mind about some, astronomy thing, very large numbers, very long distances, huge masses. And it got me interested in math, I guess, and was very intriguing. And around that same time, I think Make Magazine was starting to become a thing, and the Arduino and some of these like DIY electronics things. They were cool because they weren't focused, they weren't like academic rigor, right? It was like, you can just build these things and it's cool and you can learn how they work, and in a very like fuck around and find out attitude, which was great. That's exactly what I wanted to do. So I got very into Maker Faire and Make Magazine and this blog Hackaday, where it's just kind of all about building stuff, usually internet stuff, web, electronics, some hardware, mechanical hacking kind of stuff. Got very, very into that and decided to switch my major to do electrical engineering. And it was funny. I went to this was at like a junior college. I went to the like counselor person and I was like, I want to switch my major to electrical engineering. And I was all stoked to do it. And the guy's like looking at my transcript and where I was in the class. He's like, man, I don't know. You have to take a lot of math, like a lot. This is going to take you years just to transfer out of community college. And I was like, whatever, like, I don't even care. Let's go. And so I took a lot of math classes and then finally transferred to real university and finished up my degree and got a degree in electrical engineering. But a lot of the people that I went to school with were just getting jobs at Intel or I don't know, some big giant tech company. And I had kind of already done that and was not super excited about that route. So I actually went to work after I graduated, I went back to work at the university, which was cool. It was really cool. It was like being back in school, except for I didn't have to like take any tests. But I got to go to all the seminars and the talks, and I could drop in on lectures. And my job was to do like electronics design consulting within the like research departments. It was just like an amazing job. It didn't pay like anything, but it was an amazing job because different research departments within the like electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, computer science departments would like have these projects and not necessarily have the ability to make the tools or equipment or whatever that they needed to do to like get this research project done. So they would like hire, it was just like within the department, but they would hire me and a couple other engineers to build that for them. It was really cool. Like, we've got this crazy idea. We're going to like study magnetic fields in coal mines or, all kinds of ridiculous stuff. We just need you to like build a sensor that can do X, Y, Z. And so built that stuff for a while. I actually left that job to join a startup that was in one of those fields that kind of came out of the research from the university. Went to go work for them for a while. That was great. Got kind of a taste of the startup life, really enjoyed it. The startup went out of business, like they all do. And so then me and a guy from that startup decided that, we really liked building stuff for these projects. And so we were going to start like a consultant company. We were going to become consultants to just, do contract design work for whoever wanted it. And we had a lot of contacts in that field. And so I did that for like 5-ish years, just like talking to people about their crazy idea. And then in some cases, getting to build whatever ridiculous thing they wanted, which was fun. It was really fun. Like the bureaucratic side of those projects, not fun, but it was really cool to hear about insane ideas and get to try and figure out how to make them happen. And then like a little over a year ago, that business was kind of just coming to, I don't know, I guess its natural conclusion. Like we had lost a big client and it was sort of like good riddance anyways. They were a pain and my co-founder wanted to do something else. And I was getting very excited about this Bitcoin mining project that I had been working on sort of on the side for a little bit. I applied for a grant from OpenSats, and thanks to some really amazing people I met in the open source Bitcoin space, I got the grant, and the grant was to work on Bitaxe. And so my day job was kind of coming to an end. And so I just decided like, let's go. This is the time to do it. Not going to get a better opportunity than this. So like, I guess a little over a year and a half ago, maybe, I jumped into working on Bitaxe full time.
Wow. There's a lot to dig into with that. I'm curious where Bitcoin comes into that story for you. Were you already involved in Bitcoin, like stacking sats, like when you were working for the consulting company or like doing consulting with your co-founder? Or like at what point did Bitcoin come on your radar? And then at what point did you start tinkering around on the side with mining?
So when I was, let's see, I'm trying to think of what's the exact timeline here. So when I was in school, I was paying attention to these like Hackaday magazine blogs a lot, where they just like highlight projects every day that people are working on. And I'm pretty sure that's where I heard of Bitcoin. And it had to be very early on. They were talking about it. And it's like, okay, why do I even want this? Like, I have PayPal. I don't need another internet money. I definitely actually remember thinking that exactly. Like what is even the point of this? I don't get it. There's already plenty of solutions. And kind of like a sign from the universe, I guess, PayPal canceled my account. They shut it. Like just completely 100% cut me off from my account that had a balance. So they like closed my account with my like $20 balance or whatever and sent me this long list of like possible reasons why it might have been closed and why I was no longer allowed to do business with them. And that list, by the way, was total bullshit. Like nothing on there was applicable to me. I remember emailing them and being like, no, really, why did you close my account? I wasn't doing any of these things. And they just, we can't discuss it. It's one of these things. Your account has been closed.
Deplatformed. Crazy.
Yeah. I got deplatformed. And this was back when PayPal and eBay were very tightly integrated. So you basically couldn't use eBay without PayPal.
Right. Yeah.
That was super frustrating. And it was kind of ridiculous too, because I remember talking to people online or coworkers or people at school, I guess, about this. And they're like, you must have been doing something illegal. Why did you do this? And I'm like, no, I wasn't. I promise. I was not doing anything illegal. Like, they can just cancel your account whenever they feel like it. And I remember trying to explain this to people and being like, no, they can cut you off for any reason and you don't have any recourse, which is, I feel like a conversation us Bitcoiners have a lot now too, is like, that money in the bank is not yours. So that was kind of, I guess, planted the seeds in my mind that Bitcoin might be something important. This was early, it's like 2010, 11, something like that. Yeah, it had to be before 2011. Anyways, I'm not that smart. I wasn't like, this is great, I'm going to buy a ton of Bitcoin. I bought none, but I just kind of kept it in my mind. A little bit later, I think I read about it again on Hackaday, this blog about Bitcoin mining. Now I was like, oh, okay, now this is interesting because this is electronics, hardware, stuff that I love, combined with this revolutionary internet money. So I dug in there. And this is when I was working at the university, and it was cool. We had a large lab in the basement of the university, the digital design lab, with, I don't know how many seats. There was tons of desks with computers, but each desk had a FPGA development board, and like a pretty nice one that the students would use to do their projects. But the labs were only in there for like, a short amount of time during the day. At night, it was totally empty. So when I got into Bitcoin mining, FPGAs were popular. You could reprogram FPGAs to be Bitcoin miners. And I just happened to have access to a ton of them. So I ran this by my boss. I actually did. I was like, hey man, like, have you heard of Bitcoin mining? He's like, yeah, I think I have heard of it. Like, what's up? And so we talked about it. And I'm like, we can load up these FPGAs with Bitcoin mining firmware, more or less. It's a little bit different than that, but you can configure the FPGAs to mine Bitcoin, and we can just do this. And we have a chance at getting real money. He's like, I mean, sounds harmless to me. Let's do it. The deal is, if you get enough money to buy us a pizza, you got to share the pizza with me. That was the deal with my boss. And we didn't know about the Bitcoin pizza or anything. I mean, that had happened already, I think, but we didn't know about it. That was just kind of the deal he came up with. He was big into pizza, I guess. So I set up a bunch of these things and learned a lot about how Bitcoin mining works and how to configure miners and mining pools and Stratum and all that good stuff, setting this up. And I was mining with a pool, and I can't remember now if there was two that I was using. One was called BTC Guild, and the other was called 50 BTC. And the block reward was 25 Bitcoin back then. So we could probably figure out when that was. But the block reward was 25 Bitcoin. I was mining in one of those pools. I had a balance. We were working towards the, I don't know, $25 or whatever it was going to be for this pizza. And the pool got hacked. All the balances got corrupted. It was really weird. I logged into my account and it showed my balance, but it was way higher, like hundreds of Bitcoin in my pool wallet. And they had said that they had gotten hacked. And I was like, this is like bank error in my favor. Withdraw all of it. Like, I just hit the jackpot. The pool was totally wrecked. They didn't have the Bitcoin. The withdrawal never went through, and they shut down. And my Bitcoin that I actually had, which was way less than that, was gone. After that, I kind of dropped it for a while. I left that job to go work for the startup and didn't think about it for a few years. But it was kind of the back of my mind. And something happened. I think I was doing a project for a client that was like a solar powered, satellite connected gateway to like send sensor data up to space from the middle of nowhere, which was a cool project. I was just thinking about solar panels and was like, I wonder if I could make a Bitcoin miner that runs on solar panels. And I remember being like, oh, this is going to be just like the FPGA days. Like I can go get like a design, an open source design to use these new ASICs that are out. I can hook them up to solar panels. This would be a fun little thing to screw around with and see if I can do it. Because I had a ton of solar panels laying around my office that I was using for this job. But when I went to look for that open source way to use Bitcoin mining ASICs, there's nothing. Like nothing. Especially on the hardware side, there was nothing. There was kind of some stuff on the software side, like CG Miner and Brains, I think had an open source firmware back then, but nothing on the hardware side. And I needed to modify the hardware because I wanted it to run on solar panels, which are low voltage DC devices, not like 220 volts AC. So that sent me down the rabbit hole. I needed to figure out how these things worked. I bought a bunch of, I think S2s, like Antminer S2s on eBay, which I could now use because they split with PayPal. I bought a bunch of S2 hash boards. I started unsoldering the chips. It was the BM1380, I want to say, on those. Trying to figure out how they worked, just kind of here and there when I had free time. And also, I had to get a much better understanding of how Bitcoin mining worked, because when you're reverse engineering these things, you're just looking at these like bit streams, like actual just bits that then you can make into bytes. But you got to figure out what it means. What is the firmware sending to the chips? What is it getting back from the chips? I know it's work. That's what they're sending to the chips, and they're getting back what? And so figuring out how mining works with ASICs and things like that, there's a lot of research there. Just kept digging in. I eventually got to the point where I needed to make my own PCB to test this out, because the hash boards are like 1,000 watts, which is a lot, generates a lot of heat. The fans are really noisy. I was like, this is a pain in the neck. I can't be running this thing. I think I'd switched to S9s at this point. I can't be running this thing in my office while I'm like hovered over it with an oscilloscope trying to figure out what it's doing. It's just too hot, too loud. So I need to make my own board that has one chip on it. That'll make everything easier. I mean, that's how the Bitaxe was born. It wasn't called the Bitaxe then. I think it was originally, I just called it day miner because I was still stuck on the solar idea. Like it'd be a miner that mined when the sun was out during the day and shut off at night. Made that board, did like half a dozen revisions before it really worked. Came up with the name Bitaxe just kind of randomly. I think when I was trying to fall asleep, it's like, you're in a gold mine and you're mining with your pickaxe. What do you use in the Bitcoin mine? Oh, you use a Bitaxe. There was one conference. I was getting ready to go to Mining Disrupt, and I need to have a shirt with my project idea on it. What am I going to do? And I downloaded this font online and just typed it out. I was like, oh, that looks cool. And got some shirts printed real quick, like 6 of them. Wore one, brought a bunch to the conference, gave some out. But no, I mean, the Bitaxe wasn't a thing. No one had heard of it. Yeah, that's the origin story there, up until the point in which it was kind of a thing. I wouldn't say it worked well then.
How did the first Bitaxes get distributed? How did you start to get those to market and get people using them and interested in this idea of, supporting a decentralized hash rate and quote unquote lottery mining? How did that distribution initially look?
I made, like I said, like 5, 6 revisions of the board in different form factors, a couple different chips it was just me. I just had them here. But then once it kind of started working, I think the firmware on the control board for the Bitaxe, it was non-existent. It didn't work at all. But one thing I was able to do was hook it up via USB to my computer and use CG Miner. And it was working. It was mining, my own board with my own chip on it, my own power supply. It was working. So at that point, I hand-built 5. I think they were called Bitaxe at this point. I hand-built 5 of them. I have a lot of experience hand building electronics. I did a lot of that when we were doing prototypes for our clients at my job. So I had access to all the tools, all this stuff, and I just kind of built up 5 of these in my spare time. And I had met a couple interested collaborators at this point. A couple of the first people that I started talking to, and I was like, all right, guys, I want to mail you some of this hardware so we can really like get going, because I think I'm better at the hardware design and less good at the firmware. So I was kind of struggling with the firmware. I'd met some people that were very good at this. And so I was like, all right, let's get you guys some of these. I think of the 5, one of them didn't work. So I was down to 4, kept one for myself, and I mailed out 3 of them. One of them, I met a guy, Johnny 9, at BitDevs here where I live, and he was immediately interested in the idea and wanted to help out. So I was able to give him one in person, and the other 2 I mailed out to people in Europe who were also, I had met online and were interested. And that's how it happened. They got them and they started digging in and filled in the missing pieces and really made this thing happen. Because I had a pretty good idea of how these chips worked, how to interact with them, but there's a lot more to the miner than just that. And so I'm incredibly fortunate to have met these collaborators who are experts, clearly professionals at the end, and really wanted to help in and honestly spent a long time, like a lot, we'd be up late chatting online, working on this, like banging on it, poking it, chatting all night, and then like wake up in the morning and before work, like talk about it kind of stuff. It's very exciting.
That's how you know an idea has come, or the time for that idea has come, when that's like all that consumes your mind. It's like you wake up and you're doing it before work, and you're doing it on your lunch break, and you're doing it after work, and you eat, sleep, and breathe it. I grew up writing music, and before I'd go to school, playing my guitar, come home at lunch, walk home, play for 20 minutes, go back, come home, band practice. So that's when something is like, it's consuming you, and that's how it's like a place to focus your energy. So that's a really cool origin story, and
such a magical feeling, right? And it's like, it's not work, it's just bliss.
Well, it's pure pleasure. Yeah, you're doing it for the love of it, and that's how okay, I need to dedicate my time and energy to that. And sort of in line with what you're sharing there, that's the spirit of Bitaxe, is like open source development, and that's what makes it so powerful, and why so many people, I think, are coming together around this device and around this technology and around the philosophy of it. And I know you wanted to sort of give some love and some flowers to some of the early contributors that don't want to remain anonymous necessarily. There's a few that early on, really helped in this whole process. So go ahead and let's dig into that.
Yeah, I wanted to give a huge shout out to the people I met early. This was on Bitcoin Talk. Bitcoin Talk was like sort of a hostile place to this idea of the fact that we would make our own Bitcoin miner, at least in the like hardware subsection of Bitcoin Talk. So I got a lot of like sort of not encouraging replies early on, but then a couple people showed up, like Nebula Miner, who apparently had also been working on this for years, just kind of in secret. It was so cool. He was like, oh my gosh, and he was sending me pictures of like miners that he had made, and he would like chain them together, and also a professional in electronics design and spending his free time working on it. So we really hit it off early on and would spend all kinds of time talking about it. So he worked a lot on the early Bitaxe. I sent him a huge shout out to Nebula Miner, one of my first collaborators, and a super smart dude. Johnny 9, who I mentioned earlier, is a local guy that I met at, I just moved to town from across the country, didn't know anyone. Was like, I went on meetup.com, which is a terrible website, but I went on meetup.com. I was like, there's a BitDevs meetup, which is cool. BitDevs, for those who don't know, it's a technical Bitcoin meetup. So they go over technical topics. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is in my town. Like, I'm going to just go. And I brought an early Bitaxe prototype with me. And there's a bunch of guys there who are fantastic and we're all about this project. I think I totally derailed the whole meeting because we just started talking about Bitaxe and what the idea was and how it could work and what needed to be done. And they were all in, like the whole group was all in. But Johnny and I in particular is a professional, he does firmware design for a living, and was like, I can help with this. And so I gave him one, and he put in a ton of work on the firmware, ESP miner. And, he was also a part of these early, like late night chats, it's like it's working, and that there's all these, when you're dealing with the Bitcoin block header, which is what actually gets hashed by the miner, there's all these like strange endianness issues. Endianness is like the way the bytes are ordered. there's these strange endiness, we just go back and forth. And it's like, oh my gosh, we got it. Like, oh, we got a hash. It's right. It's working, like, oh, but it's getting too hot. Like, how do we change this and that? So that was really, really cool. I really enjoyed working with Johnny Nine on that. Super grateful for the work that he put in. Let's see, who else do we have? Oh, another person that showed up early on was a guy who goes by the name of Bitmaker. Bitmaker is in Europe, and he was like, I've also been working on this. Like, this is a fantastic idea. I would love to collaborate and help. And he's the creator of the Nerd Miner, which is a very low cost, very low hash rate CPU. It's a fantastic project. It runs essentially on Arduino. It's a tiny little thing. It's got a beautiful screen, but he was working on that. And so we synced notes and got to work together on it a lot. Another fantastic, super smart dude. Again, he's a professional, electronics design professional, does this for a living, and just kind of really dug this idea in Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining. And so it was great. Two other guys that showed up early on, Ben and Want Clue. Ben is like the smartest guy I've ever met. I've never met him in person, but the smartest guy I've ever met. He was like, oh, I want to build a Bitaxe, from scratch. I was like, well, it's kind of hard, especially if you haven't built electronics, like soldered together small surface mount components before. And he's like, whatever. And like, he showed up like, I don't know, a week later, and he's like, I built 3 and they're working perfectly. Never soldered anything together in my life. I was like, wow, that is awesome. And then he was like, you need a GUI, like you need a front end for the Bitaxe. Because at the time, if you wanted to change your Wi-Fi network, you had to like reprogram the Bitaxe over USB, like recompile the program. It was totally dumb. So Ben is the creator of VaxOS. He just jumped in and was like, oh yeah, I just made this. I don't know. It seemed like it took him like a weekend, but he's a professional working on web front end development and made VaxOS, and he just did that. And it changed the course of this project forever. It like really made it a thing that people can use, because it was a hacky little project before VaxOS. You couldn't see a chart of your hash rate, and if you couldn't see your hash rate at all, like it was super geeky. Like you had to connect to this serial log and watch like text stream by to see how it was working.
Which is something that's like not very friendly, let's say, to like the average pleb that just wants to plug in, like they can do now, plug in, very quick setup, and you're off to the races and what you have. It's very highly technical at that point. So it's pretty impressive how that all came together. And it's really a testament to the life and sort of the story that it's taken on now, is that you were just sort of in your house building, tinkering, and then all of a sudden, there's other people out there that are doing the same things, that are interested in the same things. And that highlights to me the power of open source development, and why it's so important is that this wouldn't be what it is today if you didn't connect with some of those early contributors that came in and lent their expertise and their knowledge and their passion and came together to make these improvements.
Absolutely. Like, I think I wasn't like talking to these people. I'm like, you want to get on the ground floor of my startup? Like, I can give you equity. It was like, I can promise you absolutely nothing except for a fun thing to work on. And they were all in. I think that it was because it was open source. Like, they weren't just contributing to my like business idea. They were contributing to an open source project. And this was, we did the development out in the open on GitHub, which was fantastic for recruiting new people in the beginning, because you could just see how it's working. We had a list of things that weren't working, so you could just jump in and try it, see how it worked. People would build them and they would not work at all. Sorry to you folks. It was early. I apologize. But, this is how it goes. And so it would not have come together if it were not open source. Like, no way. I mean, I would have to like have some money to hire these people so that they could work on this 9 to 5, but they already had jobs. Like, no chance it would have come together without being open source.
I mean, to me, that whole story just lends to the overall lore of of Bitaxe, and why it's so powerful is that, these centralized miners and these centralized entities, they really stifle innovation, in the raw sense of it, right? It's like, it's very slow, it's very corporate, you have to jump through all these hoops, and development just doesn't happen, and it doesn't happen at the rate that it needs to happen for mining to advance in the way that it can and will through something like a Bitaxe.
Like I said, I followed a lot of projects on Hackaday and Make magazine, and there was firmware projects, there was hardware projects not related to Bitcoin at all. I think the standard was just open source. Like people would just work on, like a TV remote, or I don't know, like something that would make coffee. And of course, they just open source their designs. Like that was the default. And so it seemed like a no-brainer to me. Like, I'm working on this project, I definitely could use some help from collaborators. Like, let's just open it up. And so it wasn't initially this idea that we need to decentralize Bitcoin, that we need to bring it back to open source. It was just kind of a carryover from what I had seen other people doing in that sort of larger DIY electronics space. But it quickly became apparent once I got going that this was absolutely needed in the Bitcoin mining space. I had looked before when I was first getting into this for some open source designs and not found anything. But the more I dug into it, the more it became like painfully obvious that Bitcoin mining had strayed from the sort of the open source fold that is Bitcoin.
So
Bitcoin, Satoshi, when he announced Bitcoin, the first public announcement of Bitcoin is, I have developed a new open source peer-to-peer currency. It's like, we wouldn't have Bitcoin if it wasn't open source, for sure. And other things like nodes and wallets, it's just open source, like absolutely. Like they don't even think about it. And here's Bitcoin mining. It's just like, oh yeah, that's over there. That's totally proprietary. We don't know how that works. And that's cool.
No, it's not in the spirit of Bitcoin at all. Satoshi envisioned it and created it. And I was, in light of that, can you sort of take everybody back to the original 50 Bitcoin blocks that were being mined, and it was mined on a GPU on a personal computer, right? What does that whole process look like from a starting point versus what we have now with mining on a Bitaxe or an Antminer?
Well, Satoshi, shortly after announcing Bitcoin, released some software that was the reference implementation. It was like, here's Bitcoin and here's the software that can run it. The source code was provided. And that software, which became Bitcoin Core, but that initial software, it mined Bitcoin. So there was a command that you could send to this software to mine Bitcoin. And it would do it on your CPU, not even your GPU initially. I think Satoshi almost certainly mined all the original Bitcoins, the Genesis block, everything using that software on his CPU. The hash rate would be very low, tens, maybe 100,000 hashes per second, kilohash. So it was going to be very slow, but it didn't matter because the difficulty was also very low back then. There wasn't anyone else mining Bitcoin. It was a very small group. So I'm sure it took a while to do because it's still proof of work, but the difficulty was lower. It was easier to mine. You could do it with a CPU. The other legends that we've heard about, they downloaded that code too and presumably started also mining Bitcoin to be a part of the network and running that command and generating new coins for themselves via the block reward. At some point, there's people that are way more dialed into this Bitcoin history than me, but at some point, there was a guy who was like, we could use GPUs to mine Bitcoin faster. I think there's a famous post from Satoshi that was like, no, wait, we're not ready yet for that high hash rate on the network. Needless to say, I think whoever this person was, they didn't wait. They just did it, which, it's permissionless. You can do what you want. Miners can come and go as they please and mine how they see fit. So as long as you follow the consensus rules, it's all good. This person, I believe, don't quote me on this, I'm pretty sure that they released that GPU code open source as well. So other people who had GPUs, which they're in computers, so plenty of people had them, could download this code and now do sort of higher hash rate mining. I want to say it was probably mega hash, right? Millions of hashes per second for these GPUs. But that would have been several orders of magnitude increase over what CPUs could do. That took off, but there was still this open source ethos, like just sharing the software, even though all the miners still were in competition back then. I think they shared. Maybe some people developed in secret and didn't share, but for the most part, if you wanted to get in on this, you could. CG Miner was started back then. CG Miner is the software that handles a lot of this mining stuff. The C stands for CPU and the G stands for GPU. So that shows you how early it was. But CG Miner is open source. You could just download it and control different CPUs, GPUs. I think people were getting really into these advancements. Like different CPUs have a specialized instruction set for doing cryptography that's more efficient. So taking advantage of those and parallelizing this, make it so it utilizes more cores on your CPU and GPUs and all the advancements that come along with that. And then FPGAs, which is where I started, they're a natural fit for Bitcoin mining because it's logic. FPGAs are electronic devices that it stands for field programmable gate array. And it is an array of logic gates that you can program and reprogram. And you can program them into a logic. You can configure the gates to form SHA-256 calculations. And it's going to do it significantly faster and more efficiently than a CPU or a GPU. And in fact, FPGAs are the precursor to ASICs. An ASIC is taking an FPGA design and it's committing it, setting it in stone. An FPGA you can reconfigure. An ASIC is an arrangement of logic gates that you cannot reconfigure. It's unchangeable. So that's that sort of progression. Oh, and I should say, FPGAs still open source. That's where I got involved. I just downloaded, they call it a bit stream. That's the file that configures the FPGA. I was able to just get one of those. I was able to get the Verilog, which is the source for that bit stream. When we moved to ASICs, that is where I think that was the beginning of the end for open source mining hardware. And it makes sense. I don't fault them for doing it because developing ASICs is incredibly expensive and resource and time consuming. It costs tens of millions of dollars to think about making an ASIC. It's no joke. It's not for mere mortals. There's been some inroads, but that's for older stuff. It's not for mere mortals. I should say ASICs are not specific to Bitcoin. ASIC stands for application specific integrated circuit, and they're used for all sorts of applications. Like your microwave has an ASIC in it that, has the popcorn and the potato button in it and configures how long the microwave is on for. Calculators have ASICs all the way up to insane like accelerometer ASICs that are in your mobile phone or battery charging circuits. It just means a specific application or a specific function that's sort of committed to silicon and put in the chip. Incredibly expensive to do. And especially with Bitcoin mining, where the name of the game is efficiency, you have to use the latest and greatest, models. Like they call it process size when you hear about like, oh, that's a 3 nanometer ASIC. That's the node size or the process size. So you have to use the latest and greatest ones to be competitive in your mining ASIC. And these get incredibly expensive, like just madness. And there's no room for error. Like you mess up and you'll just burn millions of dollars and have to start over. Like unforgiving, requires huge teams, incredible skill, costs tons of money. So I don't blame them for not wanting to share, right? If you have that much money and you're willing to dump it all in this, crazy internet money thing, like I don't blame you for not wanting to share, at least in the beginning. But, maybe we can talk about this more later, but like the concept that Bitmain, one of the largest manufacturers, they make the ASICs, the chips, as well as the whole system. That's a weird concept. That does not translate to other industries that make ASICs for other things. Usually a company will design and make the chips, and they very much want to sell the chips to anyone and everyone who will buy them and put them in microwaves and cars and cell phones and CPUs too. Like Intel, AMD, ARM, they don't make computers, they make CPUs. They make a bunch of different flavors of CPUs. but they sell them to systems builders who make the computers.
So
And
what
there's
do
a
you
lot of
think the
different
motive
computers.
is there?
What's that?
What do you think the motive is there then? Because that's, like you said, it's a bit of a sidestep from like the traditional way of building.
Well, I think the motive is for Bitmain to do that.
Yeah, like what are their incentives just to control,
Yeah.
the proprietary nature of it and get as much hash rate as they can?
I think it's just to control. Yeah, there's a lot of money at play here, and they want to be controlling. Might be a different mindset with these Chinese companies. I think they're leaving a lot of money on the table, to be honest. If they sell chips to everyone, make your own machines, but also sell the chips to everyone. Like, there's a lot of different applications of Bitcoin mining out there. Like, people would buy your chips just to design new products to sell more of your chips. Like, that's how other semiconductor fabs and chip building companies work, is they go out of their way to entice people to buy their chips, to design new products with them so they can sell more. Like, if you're working at a hardware startup, all these companies will have people dedicated to you at your company just to answer all your questions, to make it so that you will move forward and design something with their chip, because that's how they make money, and they make a ton of money doing it. That's not, they'll give you free chips. They'll have a 1,000-page manual for a $1 chip. Like, this is how much they want you to take and design with this. That's not how it works in Bitcoin mining, which I think is unfortunate. I think it's just early. In the early days of computers too, like the CPU manufacturers made computers as well. We're early. We'll break out of this. It just needs to happen.
So I think a lot of people are confused about, or just don't know about, because the general like level of education out there, and some listeners will already have a clue because they're passionate and they've done as much research as they can on their own. But one thing I wanted to sort of get out there for people sort of newer, and maybe a Bitaxe is their first foray into home mining, what is a difficulty adjustment and what actually goes into mining a block?
A lot goes into it. Let's see, what goes into mining a block? So the goal here for miners, this is set out by Satoshi as to what proof of work is and how the network is secured. But what miners want to do is take transactions, pending transactions from what we call the mempool, but essentially get it wherever they want, pick up a set of pending transactions and perform some hashes on that to break down the data, but come up with like, these are the transactions that I want to process. They take that data, combine with some other important things like the time, importantly, the hash of the previous block. That's what makes it a blockchain, is that each block contains sort of the irreversible proof of the previous block. So miners, they, in concert with the nodes, will collect up this data. We call that the block header. It's 80 bytes that represents all the transactions you want to do, the previous block, version information and stuff like that. What else is in there that's important? Oh, one of the things you add to that list of transactions, if you're a miner, is you add a transaction that says, pay the block reward to me. So you put your wallet in there and say, pay that block reward to me. That's the important transaction that you include in this. Sometimes it's called a template, but this block header. Take that and you hash it twice.
What does hashing it mean?
So hashing is a cryptographic function. It means it's a one-way function. So it takes an arbitrary amount of data and it hashes it. And the term comes from like hash browns, where you cut it up and chop it all up into tiny little pieces. But the hash function, it takes all that input data and it creates output data that doesn't look anything like the input anymore. And it's usually more succinct. So there's less data. It's compression in that way. But most importantly is it's not reversible, meaning you cannot take the output and figure out what the input was.
Right.
And we use a version of hashing called SHA-256, secure hash algorithm, and the output is 256 bits. And then Satoshi, for whatever reason, decided you're going to run that twice. So you're going to hash it, and then the output of that hash function becomes the input of the next one, and then your resulting is a hash. Okay, that's cool. That's not particularly hard to do. In fact, it's pretty easy. But what And again, this is totally arbitrary, but it's what defines proof of work. And it means that what you're looking for is a hash that has an output with a certain pattern, a certain number of zeros in it. And that's hard to do because, again, when you put in input data, you get a random output. There's no way to say, I want this output. What's the input? So the only way you can do this is guess and check, meaning you put in some data, see what the output is. Put in some data, see what the output is. You guess and check as fast as you possibly can until you get a hash that meets this output requirement with a certain number of zeros.
Is that where a hash rate comes in? Like the stronger your hash rate, the quicker you're checking.
Yeah, exactly. So hash rate is listed in hashes per second. For example, the Bitaxe, the latest one, does 1.2 trillion hashes per second. But it's just guessing and checking. Every single one of those is checked to see, did I get it? Did I get it? Did I get it? And so then when you look at the output, now the network, the Bitcoin network, has determined for some reasons that in order to be a valid block, the output needs to have a certain number of zeros in it. So that's what you're checking to see if you found. The number of zeros is referred to as the difficulty. So the more zeros it has, the more difficult it is to find a hash that meets that pattern. Like if it was, for example, you have to find an output that doesn't have any zeros in it, and okay, easy. That takes one hash to do, probably. But the more zeros, the harder it is. It's kind of like, the analogy is like if we had a raffle or a lottery, and it's like the lottery where you pick some numbers and then you draw balls with numbers on it. If we had a lottery where all you have to do is guess one number, that'd be pretty easy, right? It's like, 1 through 10, like your chances are 1 in 10 that you'll get that number right. Now we had 2 balls. Now we had 3 balls. It gets harder and harder the more numbers that you have to guess correctly. So that's exactly the effect of adding these zeros onto the output hash requirement, is it's making it harder and harder to do. That's difficulty. The Bitcoin network strives to have blocks found every 10 minutes. So every 2014 blocks, oh man, like I should know that. Some number of blocks, the Bitcoin network will say, okay, what was the average time between blocks for the last epoch, they call it, the last 2014 blocks. It ends up being 2 weeks worth of blocks. But if the average was that they were found faster than 10 minutes, well, that's a sign that the difficulty needs to get higher. That would be because more Bitcoin miners join the network. Now we need to make it harder so that we keep it at 10 minutes. And again, if it's been on average more than 10 minutes between blocks found, now we need to reduce the difficulty and make it easier. That would be because
dynamic.
Yes, it's dynamic. It's changed roughly every 2 weeks. It's a set number of blocks. There's going to be some people out there like, what is it? Anyways, set number of blocks, the difficulty changes, and that's called an epoch. And you'll hear miners complaining about it or celebrating it every time it happens because their job either gets easier or harder. That's the difficulty. That's what miners are trying to do.
What a beautiful tapestry of innovation and creativity and technical brilliance that all is, isn't it?
It really is. It's so, it's beautiful. I studied a bit of computer science in school, and the problems that Satoshi was trying to solve are difficult problems. And I think that the way that he did it, is fantastic. It's genius.
Yeah, I mean, not only as a monetary system in and of itself, but just the technical problems that are being solved to make this all functional and to have never been corrupted or tainted or hacked or anything is it's such a testament to this whole idea at large. And it's amazing. I know people don't like to call it perfect money, but that's as close as I can conceive of having something like perfect money right there with all that beautiful technical stuff woven into, the hard supply limit and just everything that comes together to make Bitcoin what it is. And I think mining really helps illustrate just how once in a lifetime once in a lifetime this really is.
Once in many lifetimes. Bob Burnett always says this is like a once in a millennium invention. We're not going to get another perfect sequence of events like that birthed Bitcoin. We're not going to get that again.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can imagine why people really wouldn't want this, like centralized control entities wouldn't want this to all come together in the way that it has. But that's the beauty of math and nature and physics and all these things that go into making Bitcoin exist in our lives. I think it's the very beautiful sort of triumph of the human spirit to make this all come together.
It really is. It's so exciting to be involved in.
And not to belabor the point too much, because that was amazingly decoded by you. But when my dad asks me or my family asks me about what's this Bitcoin mining thing, that was a really technical explanation.
Yeah, don't send them that.
Right? And that would go right over their head.
I think I've had that conversation with my dad like 5 times, and he doesn't quite grok it. I need to work on my succinct explanation.
I think it's beautiful for the people that are involved, but for the people that aren't involved that might hear this podcast, how would you explain Bitcoin mining to like a 5-year-old? How would you explain it to somebody that's like, I go to the ATM and deposit my checks still, and I stand in line at the bank teller? Like this whole concept of mining and how Bitcoin comes out of thin air, how do you explain that to them to help them conceptualize something like Bitcoin mining?
That's a good question. I had another coworker at the university when I was doing the mining there. And I remember telling him what I thought was happening. I'm like, it's like people are getting paid to guess random numbers. And he was like, this is amazing. Like, I want to be a part of this too. And then he came back to me like the next day. I think he was like, I read about it, and that is not at all what is happening. I was like, so back to the drawing board. What are miners doing? They're securing the network. Like, see how it is. Bitcoin is a monetary network, except for there's no one at the center. It's run by anyone and everyone. So how do we get a bunch of disinterested parties? How do we get a bunch of people who might not even like each other to all play fairly and process transactions? Because I want to make sure that when I pay you $20 for pizza, that it goes to you, that you get the $20. And it's in everyone's best interest if I actually, get debted $20. Like that leaves my account and goes to yours. So that's how, all banks work, except for they have a centralized control structure where there's some computer somewhere that like a couple people have logins to and can just do whatever they want. And we're just trusting that they're going to do the right thing. But how do we set up a monetary network that doesn't have anyone at the center? There's no one with a special password that can do whatever they want. And yet we can all use it. An important part of that is Bitcoin mining. It's processing those transactions.
It's the incentive.
And then the people who do that work get paid to do it by the network in a fair way. It's processing those transactions so that it's fair for everyone. It can't be undone by anyone. You can't later be like, oh no, actually I want that $20 back, and just change it.
Yeah. So in the order of things, this is getting kind of granular, but it's fascinating. When a block is solved, how does that create the Bitcoin? Like I know we go through these halvening cycles that reduces the amount that's given per block reward, but what is that chain of events? Is it's hashing, and then somebody solves that difficulty and mine the block. Where does this is something from, a boomer, like where does that Bitcoin come from, at that point? Like what is that chain of events?
I definitely remember having these discussions as a kid with my dad, like, where does the bank get the money? And he was, well, we have gold, and they have a vault with all the gold in it, and the money just represents some of that gold in the bank. And I was like, okay, well, that makes sense. Turns out that's not how it works at all. They just type on the computer how much money they want to have in someone's balance. And so when you hear with Bitcoin, where does that Bitcoin come from, that block reward, how the miners are paid? When you hear the answer to that is it just gets created out of thin air, like, well, that's not cool. We can't do that. Like, we need to have something backing it. No, it is created out of thin air, but according to a very strict set of rules that are very difficult to change, hopefully impossible to change. So the network, everyone who's running a node in the network is more or less enforcing these rules that say, when you solve a block, you get right now 3.125 Bitcoin created out of thin air for you. plus all the fees from the transactions that you processed. Now, remember earlier I said when I pick all the transactions to mine, one of the ones I get in there is a transaction to me for 3.125 Bitcoin. What's stopping me from saying I want 1 million Bitcoin to me if I solve a block? Well, if I solved a block, aka I found a hash that met that difficulty target, and it had a transaction in there saying my wallet gets 1 million Bitcoin, no other node would agree to do that because they have a set of rules that we've all collectively come to this consensus that we want to enforce. And those rules say, no, you only get 3.125 plus the transactions, not 1 million. So they would reject that block. I would get nothing. In fact, I would lose all that hard work that I put into, or my miners put into mining that block. So I'm incentivized to follow the rules because I want to make sure that I get my block reward of 3.125 Bitcoin. Because if I try and fake it, I'm going to get nothing.
Yeah, brilliant. So yeah, it keeps everything free and fair and playing by the rules. So something that might be technical for people, again, that are just plugging in their first Bitaxe, how does a node, because I know these things, they go hand in hand, those are part of the same steps to this being self-sovereign is, running a node, running your own node and running a Bitaxe. How does a node or the network of nodes reject that transaction? What does that process look like?
When I solve a block, when my miner reports to me, I found a hash that's at this target, then I'm like, okay, cool. Now what I have to do is I have to tell the world about that. So my node will broadcast. The nodes are all connected in this mesh network. Every node has a set of some number of peers that they're connected to, like a bidirectional connection to, and so it's a web of all the nodes. They're all connected one way or another. So what I do is I tell everyone that I'm connected to, like, I got it. Check this out. Here's the block. It's trivial for them to check and make sure that I'm not faking it, that it meets the difficulty requirement, the transactions included in it are valid, that I use the right previous block, that I have the right timestamp on it, etc. So they can just, a couple processor cycles, they can just check and be like, yep, good. The other nodes that I send it out to will immediately check, and then they will forward it on. They'll add it to their local copy of the blockchain, that block that I just found, and they'll also send it on so that everyone else can add it. Okay. Because remember this in Bitcoin, the ledger, which says what everyone's account balance is distributed amongst all the nodes. So in order for me, my wallet, for the world to know that my wallet just went up by 3.125 Bitcoin, my wallet balance, it needs to get that information needs to get distributed to the whole network.
So what if you try slipping in, I want 6.5 Bitcoin? Is there a first node that manually rejects that upon checking, or is this all an automatic process that looks for the inputs that says, no, it's valid, or it's someone's trying something funky here?
Well, so I run my node myself. So I could put some funny business in there that says, yeah, every block I find, I get 6 or 1 million or whatever I want to do. That's fine. And I could send that out to all my peers that I'm connected to. And maybe they're my homies and they're going to be like, yeah, that's right. We get 10 and Skot gets, 1 million. So maybe I'm really popular and I know a lot of node runners who are all in on this hoax. There's going to be some that are not in on it. Like, why would they be? And they will not add that to their blockchain. They'll just drop that as just garbage. They'll see this come in. It takes a split second to check and see if it's legit with their rules. They'll drop it and they will not propagate that further. So at some point it's going to split. And you hear about forks like Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin SV. There's a million of them. And literally what that is people who say, I have a different set of rules. I'm going to start running my node to follow this different set of rules. And that they usually call it a different cryptocurrency. They usually make up some shitcoin and call it that because they want people to join on and run their version of the software and keep that going. So that's a hard fork and people do it all the time. But you're not going to convince all the node runners on Bitcoin to change to your rules.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's why we want to have so many people running nodes, because if it were just like Ethereum, there's only a small number of actual full nodes. So like what's to stop someone from being like, yeah, we're changing the rules? And
Well, we've
they
seen the
have in the
problem with
past.
XRP and Ethereum, right? And why those are cryptos. Those are shitcoins, right? XRP's ledger. I mean, you can think what you want about XRP just from like a pure hatred standpoint. Then you start to dig deeper and you see that they halted the blocks are missing for like the first 24,000 blocks or something. It's like, well, what happened to all of that? Like that data and that money and, Ethereum being pre-mined and the ETH Foundation allegedly dumping on people's heads and stuff, every year routinely. And it's like, okay, like this is not an honest ledger. This is not an honest system. And the incentives and the structure is not free and fair for everybody. And that's what makes Bitcoin so damn special.
It really is. Remember I was talking about the Bitcoin, the reward is just created out of thin air. All Bitcoin is just created out of thin air. So like, wait, why is that cool? I mean, you can't just say, I have this much money. The only reason that you can do that is one, if you're a government and you have lots of guns and you can just say, this is the law, deal with it. Or two is if you're Bitcoin and you have a provably fair way of issuing this money to people. And it's created out of thin air, but it's created out of thin air according to very specific rules. And you can see that there's no funny business. And it's also nice that anyone can join in and use it.
Yeah, and there's consensus that, this exists.
It needs to be decentralized if you're going to be making this out of thin air. And I think that's where a lot of the shitcoins are just sort of glossing over that fact, is that it's centralized. Oh, there's no limit on the amount we can create, things like that. It's like, it's just play money.
Yeah, it's very problematic, those kinds of setups on shitcoins. So game theory with me a little bit on this one. This kind of just came to me while I was listening to you explain some of this, like about the forks that we've seen. All of those have turned out very, very poorly. One thing we saw with BlackRock in one of their commercials was, and it might be legalese, right? They might just be covering their own asses, but it said that something to the effect of the 21 million supply cap is not guaranteed, that there could be adjustments made to that at some point. And then that led to a lot of people speculating, okay, well, maybe what they're trying to say here is that they could try to fork off and control the network in their own way. How do you think that would play out for them? They have a lot of Bitcoin. They have a lot of influence, I guess, amongst the Web 2, like the common investor and ETFs and things like that. But they wouldn't get the support, just like Bitcoin Cash and all these other forks have failed. They wouldn't get the support from the node runners and the decentralized mining conglomerates that, the plebs around the world. Do you think that that's something that we could see attempted by BlackRock in the future?
Yeah, I do. Right. It's like if you have all these people that have their retirement, their life savings in ETFs, then you could imagine a situation, I guess, where BlackRock's like, you know what? Your balance now is in BlackRock coin. If you want to ever get that back, you best adopt BlackRock coin. I guess it seems like that should be illegal. I guess I don't really, bizarre. No one really knows what all the laws are, but you could imagine something like that. Or maybe it's a little bit more mischievous. It would have to be a little bit more mischievous, like something more subversive that's not immediately apparent what it is. Like, oh, you can't use non-KYC Bitcoin anymore. Use BlackRock because, we have your social security number. Now that's a fork. There's differing prices for non-KYC versus KYC Bitcoin. And then some different rules come along regarding what you can use each one for. And I guess they've successfully changed it. That kind of seems like it's just, they're like, we're very popular. Let's fork it. I don't know.
It's a real threat.
That's sketchy, right? They got a lot of money under their control.
Yeah, I mean, they're clearly one of the most evil companies or entities to ever exist. And now Bitcoiners are like, yeah, look at it, institutional adoption. It's like, no, we need to run Bitaxes and run nodes and keep the original ethos of Bitcoin and Satoshi's vision alive. And I'm pretty sure it wasn't to get BlackRock to adopt it. It was free and fair, distributed, permissionless resistance money for the everyday person. And so I think we're getting everything crossed with what's going on right now in the political landscape, right? And we need to tread very carefully and to not stray too far away from the decentralized ethos of all of this.
Absolutely. We can do our part to remind people that that's an important part of Bitcoin. That's what gives us its value. Like, that is why this funny internet money has value, is because of that decentralized nature, permissionless, open development. There's no central controllers. People are, the various governments around the world are trying their best to let people know what a shitcoin fiat is, right? With different laws. And I think you're going to have more and more people waking up to that. Just, and as number goes up too, right? We remind people like this has value because of these, because of this ethos, these core principles. And
do you think that they're getting on board? Like, do you think that all of this shift in narrative in the political landscape is if you can't beat them, join them moment? Or do you think they're trying to corrupt and co-opt this because they realize they can't defeat it? Like, if this was going to be killed, they would have killed it already. So, part of me is like, okay, they're thinking, okay, we can't corrupt this. It's bound by these certain rules and laws, and and it's done what it's done price-wise and adoption-wise without us, like in spite of us. So we better join them. How do you see all of that?
I think that investors and companies, corporations specifically, they're like obligated to be profitable. Right? You have a corporation, you have a board, they just care about being profitable. Like, maybe they have some sort of longevity goals in there, but that's only so you can be more profitable for longer. They'll do whatever they think is going to make them the most amount of money. And we've had a lot of number go up lately, so it kind of seems like Bitcoin can do that for you. Maybe there'll be something else shiny that they go after later. Bitcoin will be better because of it, and we can't keep them from doing it. Right? That's the point, is it's for everyone. It's permissionless. Anyone can use Bitcoin. The optimist in me wants to think that what's going to happen with the success of the ETFs and, Saylor and all these national stockpile, everyone getting into Bitcoin, is it's just going to make more Bitcoiners. And that makes Bitcoin better.
Yeah, from there, more people will dig deeper, hopefully listen to podcasts like this that are adhering to the spirit of Bitcoin, and they'll start to run their own node and mine on their own at home. And that's what this really is all about. And, you're going to lose some of those people to, centralized attempts within Bitcoin, right? They're not going to run nodes. So a percentage of those people are going to come and start to realize that what the whole value proposition here is not just number goes up like some of these companies, but the self-sovereign angle of all of this, the permissionless nature, the borderless worldwide nature of all of this. And I think the more of those that come from that, the better.
Absolutely. I think there'll always be a subset of the people who are interested in it, for the right reasons. And that's good. And the more that we have of this, the more information, the more tools, the more opportunities we have for people to do it right, the more people are going to do it right.
Yeah. And speaking of doing it right, there's a lot of options, or there's a few options, I should say, when you fire up a Bitaxe or you look to get into Bitcoin mining. And I know one thing we wanted to sort of extrapolate on or expand on a little bit is like solo mining versus mining to a pool, and what that all means, why it's important, and what you recommend. So let's sort of dive into that a little bit.
Sure. Solo mining. Bitcoin is decentralized. We don't have a central marketing group that says this is what all these terms mean. There's no glossary. There's no like dictionary for what all the terms mean in Bitcoin. There's some stuff in the white paper and Satoshi's post that I guess are as close as we have to an official definition of things. But we don't have a definition of what solo mining is, which I think is really tripping up a lot of people new to this field, is that depending on where you go, you'll hear a different definition of solo mining. So I'm sorry, that's the way it is. This is a side effect of doing it right. I think I would like to popularize the definition that solo mining means you are not mining not pooling rewards. Solo mining means you're not pooling rewards with others. And so, well, what does that mean? That means that when you mine and solve a block, you get the full block reward. But that's also a risk because it's incredibly difficult to get. that full block reward. You could spend your entire life doing it and never get one. So that's a risk that you take, but you also get the whole reward. You're out there solo, like you're out digging in the ground looking for gold, and no one's going to pay your bills until you find a gold nugget. The other option is pooled mining, where you join with a pool and you say, even if I don't find a block, if someone else does, we're all going to split it amongst ourselves. We're going to pool our resources so that we all get paid out. And the reason why that works is because you get a smaller payout more regularly. That's how the majority, like network hash rate speaking, that's how the majority of mining is done, because people have electricity costs, they have rent, all that stuff. So if they're going to be professionally mining, they need to get a regular payout. And that's not necessarily what happens with solo mining. Now, what should you do with your Bitaxe? I don't want to be prescriptive. I don't want to say what people should do. The whole point here is that we're going to get a lot of people into Bitcoin mining. And because they're all different people with their own brains, they're going to have different ideas about how they should do it. What is the way, what are my goals? What do I need to have happen? What do I want to have happen? And just by that fact, that's going to decentralize mining, is because they're all going to make different decisions, and it's going to be very hard to influence all of those people any one way. Right now, the big mega miners, there's a very short list of people you'd probably have to call up to influence how mining works. That's not good. We want to have that list be very long, such that there's no possible way you could know all the people mining and or coerce them or convince them to do something different. My personal opinion is I solo mine, because with the Bitaxe, if you mine with a pool, you're looking at, 50 sats a day, maybe. And that's the best you'll ever do, is get that. It'll actually only get worse. So like, what am I doing? I'm like, it's not even a penny. Like, I'm going to just commit myself to only ever making cents, like maybe $1 a year or something like that. Like, well, that's, you could probably find more money on the sidewalk, just walking around in the parking lot. Like, I'm doing it. If I'm doing it, I want to like go big or go home. So I'm just going to lottery mine in hopes that I get 3.125 Bitcoin all to myself, which is hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of Bitcoin currently, and is a game changer for anyone. I'll guess, statistically, I'll never do it. I'll never hit a block, but it can happen. It has happened. So a Bitaxer solved a block. A solo miner on a Bitaxe solved a block last summer, got the full block reward. As more and more Bitaxes get out there, this will start to happen more and more often, as it'll happen to people.
And that person
that's
was
the way to go.
Solo mining, right?
Yeah, I think
not
that's
mining
cool.
to a pool.
Yeah, people call solo mining lottery mining because you have really bad odds or really bad chances at a lot of money.
Right. But I think one of the things that will change the perspective on that is that as the open source development of Bitaxes accelerates, as supply choke points kind of loosen, if there's developments in that area, the amount of hash rate that you're able to fit on a Bitaxe device, which we're seeing with like the nerd axes and things like that, like it's only going to get stronger, and it's going to multiply, and that's going to multiply hash rate and therefore multiply your odds at actually hitting a block with a solo miner, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we were talking earlier about the chances of solving a block with an exahash is 1 in 6 days. So if there was 1 million Bitaxes out there, an exahash is 1 million terahash. So if there were 1 million Bitaxes out there, more or less, all solo mining, then one of those Bitaxes would solve a block every week. It all adds up. It just depends on who it goes to. So 1 million Bitaxes, that's a lot. That's achievable. I think the goal is not to just get Bitaxes out there. The goal is to get Bitaxes out there, bigger Bitaxes out there, faster Bitaxes, cheaper Bitaxes, different open source mining projects, water heaters, hot tub heaters, all those things out there, open source, decentralized, all owned by people who are thinking about it differently. And then we can have a considerable part of the network hash rate and really make a difference in the decentralization of the network as a whole.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most important points to drive home, and we're going to drive it home on every episode of the Home Mining Podcast is, it's amazing to hit a block, and it's amazing if you get that privilege and, the number goes up in Bitcoin and all of this, but you're playing a part in a global decentralized network that helps give that Bitcoin any value at all, right? So, I get it. Everybody wants to hit the block, but this is nothing short of a revolution, right? It's taking power into the hands of the plebs, right?
It really is. It really is. There's strength in numbers here, and it's provable, the strength in numbers, and it's also fun. Like it's cool to dive in and learn how it works. Tell your friends, you should also stack sats, but along with that, you can get a deeper understanding of how this freedom money actually works, which is worthwhile to do. One of the things I really was excited to do on the Bitaxe was show the best difficulty on the screen. So when you look at it, you can see the best difficulty. And it's like, well, okay, what is that? That's how close you are to solving a block. The higher that number gets, the closer it gets to the network difficulty, which right now I think is like 100 trillion. The closer that number gets to that, the closer you are to winning the lottery. It's kind of cool. It's fun to watch it go up and see how good you did and compare with your friends and stuff.
So if you were running one Bitaxe versus if you were running 10 of them, are they all contributing hash rate? Like if you have multiple, are they contributing to a higher difficulty? Is that all done through like pointing them at the same wallet and the same node and pool?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. If you have 10 Bitaxes, your odds are 10 times better at solving a block. They're all working together. Assuming they're all pointed to wallets that you control, then they're working together. I get a lot of questions like, how can I connect my Bitaxes together and have them work together? And it's like, just point them all to your wallets and they're working together.
Beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. And I think, this is something to your previous point that's exciting and fun because it's something tangible. I mean, just look at this beautiful piece of technology and innovation. I mean, it's nothing short of brilliant and beautiful, and the ideas and the brilliance of so many contributors coming together to make it what it is. It's something tangible because Bitcoin is something that you don't hold it in your hand, right? And so having a node and having, your own Bitaxe is something that sort of brings it all together, at least for me and for a lot of the people I've spoken to. It's a way to feel like you're part of something and that you're contributing to something and you're advancing the ethos of this sovereign money.
I mean, you actually are. You actually are. Like, it doesn't have to be a Bitaxe, but any of these things getting involved, you actually are contributing to freedom money that helps everyone, which is, like we were talking about before, it's technically beautiful. It's potentially profitable. Like, there's so many good things that go along with it. It's really fun to be involved in any number of ways like this. Amazing. And also a shout out to any developers or want to be developers who are listening to this too. Like, developing on this is really fun too. So if you want to get involved in that, contributing in whatever area excites you, we would love to have you. It's a pretty rad community.
Man, we see people creating solar Bitaxes and hydraulics and all sorts of amazing ways to do this. And living out here in Mexico, I'm really anxious to get the solar setup going because we have no clouds here. I have a nice rooftop with a hammock. I'd love to set this up right there and just, there's no cloud cover. It never rains. It's like sunny 99.9% of the time. And I'm just itching to get one running out on solar power and, play with that, tinker with that. And that just helps enhance my experience and my understanding of all of this. So I'm going to hold you to, before I hold you to something here, if people want to get involved, if they're a developer, if they have a passion, they should head over to the OSMU, the Open Source Miners Discord, right?
Yes. We have this group called the Open Source Miners United, or OSMU. It's a Discord group, quite popular. There's a lot of people in there talking about everything to do with Bitaxe, other open source miners like NerdMiner, NerdX, working on crazy new ideas like the solar miner that's got immersion setups. Anyways, check it out. I have a link to it. If you go to the Bitaxe website, bitaxe.org, I got links to OSMU. You can hop in there can jump in. I'm in there like every day. That's basically, these are the people that I work with on developing Bitaxe. So we'd love to have you.
It's an amazing hub of knowledge. It's a little overwhelming because there's so many big brain people in there and so much to digest when you first get there. But find your lane, poke around, and see what sticks for you and how you can contribute. And this is something I talked about in the first episode here with Matt and Hunter, is to stop asking what Bitcoin can do for you and ask what you can do for Bitcoin. And I think getting involved in OSMU and open source development in general is how people can start to contribute and give back to Bitcoin, right?
Man, Matt and Hunter with Solo Satoshi is such a good example. Like, these guys just showed up. They didn't have to ask me for permission. They just hopped in. They like saw something they wanted to do and just did it. And they've been incredibly beneficial to the project. I think they've been very beneficial to themselves and the whole Bitcoin ecosystem, just because they saw something and like went for it and jumped in. And this is what it's all about, is launching those types of things. Sellers, contributors, anything and everything is what we need.
Yeah. Those boys have done a great job providing, the best customer service and resources on Bitcoin mining and on Bitaxes. And that's why this podcast is happening today, right? So you don't have to give us any timelines, or I'm not going to hold you to any specific dates, but I'm gonna dig for some alpha here. What's next in the year ahead? What are you excited about? What's got you up at night and up early in the morning in terms of what's next for Bitaxe development, Scott?
Man, the cool thing is, like, this is my full-time job now, but I still stay up late and get up early working on it. Well, man, there's so much stuff. There's so many things coming. I hate giving like announcements, but I can tell you concretely what's coming up. We're going to have the Bitaxe Gamma Turbo. That's been, like I said, I don't do announcements, but we've been talking about it. It's coming. It's a dual chip Gamma. So it'll be two of the chips from the Gamma. That's the chip out of the S21 Pro for anyone who's counting. The cool thing is it's going to be more than twice the hash rate of the Gamma. This is fully overbuilt. One of the things we were noticing with the Gamma is that it had a lot of headroom. Like, this chip is very overclockable. We could get quite a bit more hash rate out of it. But what was happening was we were saturating the heat sink, the voltage regulator, things like that, which were kind of just built for that nominal hash rate and power. So the Gamma, way overbuilt. We'll definitely see more than twice the hash rate of the Gamma from just these two chips. It's bigger heat sink. It's 6-layer PCB. It's physically bigger to have that bigger heat sink. The voltage regulator is way beefed up. I think this is going to be good. This should be exciting for the overclockers out there, for the immersion fans, for people who like playing around with different heat sinks. I think this will be real cool. I don't do like release dates, but coming soon. I mean, I got one here.
Sweet alpha for everybody.
Yeah. All right. So this is not the new heatsink that's on there, but this is a testing heatsink. But let's see here. We compare this to a normal Bitaxe. You can see it's bigger,
beefier. Yeah.
So yeah, it'll look something like this. This is a prototype. It's got the two chips on there. It's hashing quite well. Things that remain to be done are getting the fan controller working, because we're using 12-volt fans now, so different fan controller. Some optimizations for sending work out to two chips versus just the one. But yeah, stay tuned to OSMU for all the details on that. That's where we publish everything. So past that, I think, famous last words, but I think that's going to be the last Bitmain-based Bitaxe. It's been a big goal of mine to get off of Bitmain. All the Bitaxes so far have been based on Bitmain chips, ASICs. And that's not good. It's not scalable. For one, Bitmain won't sell us the chips. We don't know how they work completely. And all the Bitaxe manufacturers right now are buying Antminers, like these $7,000 machines, and unsoldering the hundreds of chips that are in there, which is a pain in the neck. That is not how electronics are made. I kind of knew this getting into it, but when things were small, it was no big deal, but it's not scaling, right? We're selling tens of thousands of Bitaxes now, and this has been a bottleneck, is the supplier of chips. The fact that we don't have a willing chip partner. So 2025 goal is get off of Bitmain, go somewhere else. Where are we going? There's a few different options right now. One thing that happened, which is pretty cool, we announced this at the TeleHash, is that, well, let me back up. Intel, famous chip maker, actually made Bitcoin mining ASICs, and they made millions of them, the chips. Then they canceled the project. I got to talk with several of the people that worked on this project, and it's kind of just, I guess what happens at big companies is they invest millions and millions of dollars into something and then just be like, nah, we're done. So they did that. Change of heart in upper management, I guess. They canceled the project, and this was a couple of years ago. Nevertheless, there's millions of these chips that exist. They're not the latest and greatest. They're a couple generations older, but I think that's fine because they are free. Block, Jack Dorsey's company that works on Bitcoin stuff, acquired like millions of these chips and donated a huge supply of them to the 256 Foundation for free, with the restriction they need to be given away free. So we're going to use these Intel chips, these ASICs, to make a new Bitcoin miner. Bitaxe, and then some of these follow-on projects like the Ember One will be made with that chip. And it will have a competitive hash rate with the other Bitaxes, but not efficiency. So the efficiency will be worse, but the hash rate will be the same, but the price will be hopefully way less. I don't know if many people know this, but the chips that we use in the Gamma, they come out to like $40 each. Like, they're not cheap, and you have to wrestle them out of these existing systems. So like, we're at $80 for the 2-chip version. Like, that's not the right price. So hopefully free chips brings that down. And I think in these lower hash rate miners, the efficiency isn't that big of a deal because they're not profitable systems to begin with. So what do you care if you're, using 20 watts versus 30 watts? Like, that's still nothing at the end of the day on your power bill. Look for Intel chips. Let's see what else. We've got Block, the company that donated these chips, has also announced that they are making their own ASIC. I've been, and some of the other people in this have been talking with them a lot about this chip. They have committed to making them available to us, to me, to people working on this project. So that's awesome to hear. They're not ready yet. I begged and pleaded, like, send me a data sheet, send me some samples. And they're like, it's not ready yet. When that's ready, I trust that they will make them available to all of us working on open source Bitcoin mining. So, as soon as they're ready, look for a Bitaxe with that chip, because that'll be cool, as it'll be the latest and greatest efficiency. So you can expect a very efficient Bitaxe out of that. We don't know how much the chips are going to cost, but presumably it'll be the latest and greatest efficiency and that hash rate that we've come to love with the Bitaxe Gamma. And I'm in talks with another ASIC manufacturer that people have heard of. I'm not going to say who it is, but look for a Bitaxe with yet another ASIC in it from another manufacturer that's not Bitmain, coming soon.
Stranglehold of the centralized controllers is slowly loosening with this alpha here that you're sharing, and that's a beautiful thing. That's going to stop stifling the speed at which we can, expect innovation and just get more Bitaxes with more variability, more options out into the hands of the people that want to solo mine at home. That's incredible.
Hell yeah, that's what it's all about. Let's do this.
Hell yeah, brother. We are looking to a really bright year ahead. Then we're already blessed with what we have last year with Bitaxe and your brilliant innovation, but I'm even more stoked after this for what lies ahead. So I want to thank you sincerely for taking the time and the energy to share all of this with me and with everyone listening. And, any way that you need support, I'm sure the people listening, and myself included, are happy to support. Yeah, it's been an honor talking with you. I'm going to leave all of your links and information in the description below on all platforms, so people can connect with you and contribute to the project. And if you want to buy your very own Bitaxe, we'll leave a link to Solo Satoshi in the description as well. And Skot, thanks so much for sharing your brilliance with us in the world.
2 sats, man, this was great. Thank you so much for having me. I loved
Well, I'm sure we'll have you back for rounds 2 through 10 sometime soon.
Let's go.
Until next time, this has been the Home Mining Podcast. Thanks for listening.